know I need my neighbor to help me with this, as opposed to, where we can be very self-contained and able to, well, now I've got it sorted out, I don't need to, I don't wanna share that, that's private.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of them, they have to. And, I think when Richie and I talked, I said, it feels like, as she was describing things, it's like being old before your time, where, you are in your thirties, and yet suddenly, someone else is having to drive you around because you haven't got a driver's permit, and you can't drive, and you can't communicate with people, because they're talking about things that you don't get, and, that's kind of frustrating, I can't.
Well, and you also have incorporated more hands-on activities into the curriculum.
And that's part of, Denver and I talked, just like lengthening it, having like a 3-hour session instead of a 2-hour session, and kind of breaking that very, very deliberately into sections for like kind of vocabulary, and then looking at demonstrations and role play, because that tended to be the thing that got pushed out just in our taking so much time to cover curriculum, and also kind of, or the vocabulary, and trying to give them information about what banks do. And that, I think, given how they acted in BizTown and how they took that time to learn how to say these words. I had an activity for us to do when we did our deposit lesson on, someone being the banker and someone being the customer account coming in, and we just ran out of time for that. And I think with extra time, incorporating that kind of stuff, we start to build that confidence and get more practice for that. But English is always going to be the biggest barrier, because the banks aren't familiar with where these clients are coming from, and understanding how to modify things.
And there was one other idea you had about incorporating financial literacy into ESL classes in some way, so that part of what they're learning is around financial literacy. Was that?
I think we still see it as kind of a standalone. It's hard to get into an established class, just because there's so much that they're trying to do with them, just to kind of cover the basics, and that it's difficult to. You can't really give them the experience they need to turn the words and the knowledge into an understanding and action if you just cram it into a single 3-hour class. It needs to kind of have the legs. And then there is that, well, how do you create the demand for those classes, because there are so many other things that are important.
So let's, thank you.
Thank you.
Why don't you pull up chair? So first you had a comment on payday lenders that you didn't get to make, so.
Well, let's see, now I'm not necessarily put that. To this notion of having partnership and who are the right partners for stuff like this, many years ago in one of the housing conferences that I went to, in the early days when we were doing kind of the homeownership program.
Right.
In the housing world, the bad guys are the pre-manufactured housing, right? Clayton homes,
Right.
because these are houses that they don't appreciate, they really depreciate over time. Right? So that's kind of it's kind of the payday lenders to financial services. But I heard a presentation. I'm trying to make sure, but I heard a presentation there by someone from Clayton Homes that basically planted the seed in me, and basically it's a long story, but what they had done, because they knew, Clayton Homes, they recognized that they were seen in the industry as the bad players. And so they had come up with a strategy to rebrand, and not to spin it, but just to rebrand and to really address head on some of the genuine concerns that people, because the reality is, in that world, people go to that type of housing because whether we like it or not. And so they created a program to address it on and to partner with agencies that were working in the housing world to address and create neighborhoods that address the problems that.
Right.
And so that kind of planted it, because it was a very nice kind of message. And so in the financial services sector, the payday lenders are the devil, right? For right reasons. But I wonder but the truth is that as the First Tennessees and the SunTrust and the Bank of Americas of the world are closing down and getting away from these communities, all these, the payday lenders are the ones that are moving into those spaces and for whom the business case is materializing. They're the ones that are making money from serving this population. Granted, of course, they're making money in many instances by
Charging exorbitant.
by their predatory practices. So I wonder, just thinking out loud, if there's an opportunity, again, just for
Just thinking
thinking
out
out
loud,
loud,
yes, yes.
is
Blue sky in here.
is that it is to work with a payday lender industry or a provider and sitting down and saying, figuring out a way, because all these folks are walking into those branches. I mean, Advanced Financial in particular is what I'm thinking of, what I think about, because we've met those guys. It's a husband and wife couple, and you see them everywhere. They are spending millions and millions of dollars.
In the
And
community.
they have,
Is that,
these are folks that have a good heart. That's all they are nice people. I mean, they're not this, just as an individuals, they're not this kind of, they're a husband and wife. And
are
two
they
kids.
local, is that
They're
Advanced
local,
Financial?
they're local.
Okay.
And so, again, I just wonder about the merits of sitting down at the table with them and saying, this is the void in education with this population. How is it? I don't have the solution, but wouldn't it be
The
nice
banks are
if
going
there
to
is,
do it, yes.
if there is, wouldn't it be nice if there was a way, if there was a right model to engage this, a player, and I'm not saying the industry, I'm just saying things.
A player,
wrong,
yeah.
a player, and coming up with a way of collaborating in a way that it helps them with their image. And it may not be possible because it may require them moving away from their business model. Is there,
Or adding to their business model. See, the other thing, and I don't know if this is possible or not, but that crazy idea of the credit union, all right, I know that we threw out in the last meeting.
Right.
Because it didn't work in San Francisco, but, and we can't find any place else that it's really worked, I guess. But the idea of some place housing, a credit union or a financial entity that is, almost run by and sustained by immigrants and refugees. I mean, now, I realize that integration and assimilation is one of the things that, you would like into the community, but if the banks aren't gonna step up, then why not create something that is hospitable to welcome? And I don't really care, I mean, if it helps their image, just like we used to say when somebody got an EEOC violation, that they were the ones to go to start selling your diversity training to, because they needed it. I mean, yes, it's ambulance chasing, but it's also, they need it. So maybe this, what's your reaction?
Well, I wrote down a few, only because, and I feel differently about Advanced Financial.
And I can tell, and you know why I can tell? Because the Tom starts.
Hyperventilating.
And I do think they're good people, don't get me wrong. I think that, but I don't think, I think our Tennessee laws allow them to do what they do, and they do it to the best of their ability. That's true. So, with that said, I do think there's a hybrid that we can come up with. I mean, I really do think this is a great possibility. Credit unions will work, because I went to a credit union at a hotel, and we developed a credit union, and the credit union was willing to work.
Oh, so that's what you did when the banks wouldn't do it?
Right, no arrival. So it was really interesting, because when Bank of America, I said, wanted to end up charging for check cashing, I said, what are you out of your mind? These are your customers. So there's a way of going about that. But I'm thinking, you mentioned Dollar General earlier. I think Dollar General, right, who's also working, does a lot of business in new arrival communities, would partner with a credit union, or partner because A, the customers are already coming in, all right, and B, it could be a new business model for them, because they're not in these payday loans at the moment, which is kind of interesting, and they're not in banking. So I would think they have all these locations already, you know, and we know Walmart has already gotten into the banking end.
Oh, I didn't know that, they have
Yeah. And they've done that, so.
their own bank or they partner?
They're on.
Their own bank. So,
Walmart was the one.
so it's really very interesting, and I think there's a possibility there. And knowing, like Steve Turner, for example, I think he'd be really interested in hearing some of this. And I think the other thing is that there's a real disconnect from those who are running those businesses, the managers and the supervisors, to those who own or have investment in those businesses. And that disconnect is, where's my money? Up here, to those that are saying, I need that money and I have to get it quickly, versus I have to make an investment in this community to get that money. So I think there's a real disconnect there, and I think part of that came up just recently in a Dollar General claim that I got from my new office. And it was really interesting how it was handled, and it wasn't handled well. So that was another thought. The other thought was, Habitat for Humanity, and Danny Herron. Does everybody know Danny? He's the CEO. There used to be a bank president in Williamson County. Very, very
I
interested.
didn't know we used to be a bank.
Yeah, very, very interested in this community. I mean, it's become this like second, third love, you know. And I know he would love to sit down with you or somebody and discuss how this might be possible. All right, because I just think there's a business model here that we could work with. The other thing I thought was come up is age versus need, needs versus wants, and I thought that was a very interesting. I think there's some new arrivals who are of age, who are looking at what happens to my family after I leave, versus those that are getting here at a young age wondering, and I think that this whole banking opportunity can fit in there somewhere. So that's another way of looking at that. Last but not least, I think is the idea of transportation. Something that for this new arrival community is really disturbing to me, and disturbing in that, and it involves this, is that, you know, so how do I get from point A to point B? Most of their buying is done locally. Most of their banking is done locally. Most of their money's under their bed, and that's a problem. So, and I look at what is the AMP now, the big conversation around this, and I'm really concerned about that. I'm really concerned about that because there's no lower cost housing in city centers. We pushed them out to further in the community, and now we're taking away the opportunity 10 years from now for their children to get transportation that's needed. You talked about getting a car, you know, that some of these folks would need a car, but it's the idea that we have to start somewhere, and I'm really kind of concerned that we don't. So, and I do think businesses have a role in that, meaning banking should be speaking up, and we really gotta, so I think this needs to be more of a coordinated effort, perhaps from a business perspective, versus a,
Versus just training one population. It goes back to I'm concerned about frustration on their part that we teach certain skills that they actually can't practice because there's no place to do it.
yeah, you know, and that was interesting. The other thing is how many businesses have come to Conexión Americas and said, you know, I need people who not only speak Spanish but understand the community, or gone to NICE and said that about another new arrival population, and I'm not as many as I would have anticipated. I guess that's my thought process there, and I would think, because we're doing this study now in the city on ESL and so on and so forth, it's amazing to me that banking doesn't say, wow, so if the Kurdish population is the largest in the nation here, how many Kurdish banking associates do we have? All right. I know we didn't do that from the city perspective because the first Kurdish police officer is Ramzia's brother. That's the first one. Oh my God, what did we miss? And I'm worried about what's going to happen in 2035 when we're not hiring today to fill those positions that are needed tomorrow. And I think that's, if government's not doing it, if business isn't doing it, government certainly isn't. So.
what's the answer to the question about people coming to Connexion to ask for resources, personnel, people who they can hire into their businesses?
It doesn't happen, as you said, it doesn't happen as much as you would hope or think. And what it I mean, it's, what the answer is, I mean, very pragmatically, it's on the website, we have a job posting module, and so you know, we can
Post
do
the
that,
job.
and put it out there. I mean, we're also clear to say, we're not an employment agency.
Right.
I mean, one of the things that we learned this maybe the hard way in earlier days, is that people come to you and say, I'm looking for X, Y, Z, and so, you have X, Y, Z here, because you met with X, Y, Z in the morning, it's like, oh, hey, they're looking for they're looking for somebody, and so she goes, and then 3 months later, it doesn't work, and so,
You get one.
yeah, I mean, you kind of, and so you have to be very careful into how, there's a role facilitating sharing of information without getting in the middle of it, and I think.
And there's also a quid pro quo there. I think a lot of businesses approach Connexion, MICE, and other agencies, social service type things, and say, well, gee, what can you do for me in that community? If you partner with me, I can do this for you. And it's sort of like, can I be, because I've seen that happen, can I be I'll be your bank, but tell everybody I'm your bank and I'm doing you this. And I think that that's the wrong approach for business. You see, and that's just a totally wrong approach, because there's no buy-in. They think the buy-in is, I'm giving you a $50,000 grant to help tile your floor, but that's not a buy-in.
And that's what I was gonna say, is that I think at times we get approached take us to the gatekeeper. It's not a part of a cohesive strategy where we value this community and we want to build a relationship with them. It's, can you give us access to the base, or can you help us sort of fill in this gap in order to make this profitable for us? It's not part of a greater sort of relationship with the community and part of a broader trajectory.
So it's terrific.
You gotta be very careful with what you propose, because you can't be the gatekeeper. You can't, even if you say, go, all right, here first, which we don't do, right? You don't do first, so here's the list, or here's the, still, it's not going to, 3 months down the road, or a year down the road, they're gonna look at, okay, and we've had those conversations, I lost support from funders that's their expectation. Here's the check, and
Yeah,
they're really
yeah,
like,
yeah.
well, we look at this, and, we can only point to this, there's one in particular, there's several, but
In other words, the results
I
they're
understand,
expecting
but that
are
conversation went
unreasonable.
like this. Hey, last year, we're looking at our philanthropic giving, last year we gave you guys $10,000, we put you on this list, and all I see is $160 revenue source on a monthly basis from an account that came from you all. We just can't justify the investment. And so it's like, so don't call it a philanthropic.
That's
giving.
right, that's
Give it,
right.
your marketing,
Right.
it's a marketing budget, and so, we, that's that. So anyway, we've kind of digressed,
But the broader, we're conscious of your time, but the broader thing that's come out of this, and we'll get back to the actual training and what happens next, but the broader thing that's come out of it is there really is work for somebody to build a business case for doing business with you or I will commute, right? I mean, and
Absolutely. The big question is the time. I mean, it's like when you build a business case, is what is that return? Is that return? And even those that care, you got to recognize that it is, we live in a world that's competitive, where results and and resources are scarce. And I mean, no one understands. I mean, the city, so the school system understands the impact of the new arrival, and not to make the business case, but is the school system making the investments that are required today? Well, they're not, and part of it is not because they don't care or they don't know it. I mean,
they just don't have
the resources, and and it's just a fight of So,
Okay, here's another
can you
question.
make a case, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, something that is, I've been sort of running through my mind, it's sort of maybe the flip side of this conversation, is that what is striking to me was that when we, starting out, we thought that the target audience, for this would be, new arrivals that were unbanked, and that sort of the ending point would be that then they would be banked, and that would be benchmarks that demonstrated a lot. And what you found is that they were all already banked, and so that's how we ended up with this specific group of people who maybe weren't relatively fluent in English because they seemed the least banked, but they still had bank accounts. And so what's striking to me is that the question that I'm sort of toying with is how did we get here? Is that they are clients of banks that are not really, they're already clients of banks that are not meeting their needs, and that there at some point is someone who's facilitating this process of getting them to a bank, and someone who's in some cases doing all of this for them, which I'm not really experienced enough with it, but I would presume refugee resettlement agencies are probably playing a lot of that sort of role and helping facilitate some of that process. So I'm curious about what we do within the current parameters, because
Right.
somehow these people have banks
I
and
think that's
bank
a very
accounts.
good point.
Great point.
And so
I think it's a very, very good point.
I'm interested in that side of it as
And I
well.
think some of it was, it seems to be, it's very much word of mouth, so like if someone has a bank account and someone else, you're like, hey, well, you should come do this, let me take you to this
Mhm.
bank. One of the things Amber said is that the people that go through their leadership program are often the ones who are taking others to the bank or to the doctor or stuff like that. It doesn't seem that, in talking, and I haven't talked with a lot of them in depth, but it's nice to talk with them in more depth, that they don't necessarily as a resettlement agency promote or try and get their clients to have a bank account, that they're a lot more focused on getting a job thing tied down. So I think it becomes something that is a lot more grassroots, the whole, them ending up with a bank account, and that it is just luck of the draw of who they talked to, who said, or, maybe it's that they work at Tyson and there's a bunch of people that they travel out there with who are, well, we do this, and so they just kind of do it.
Well, Lindsay's question, really bring us back to reality here, and that is, some bank has given them a bank account.
Yeah.
It would have been nice to know which banks they
Yeah, I
were.
would love to see
they have
those
banking
statistics
accounts.
about whether, surely banks know the demographics of their clientele, and whether they're being strategic in catering those services appropriately. But also, I think we sometimes hear from employers. I think I spoke to a man on the phone the other day who said, yeah, I gave, my employee a check and he didn't know what to do with it, so I drove him to the bank and took him to a bank and said, here's what you do. Some farmer, and so I don't know if we work with, to some extent, employers, like, you were saying that you facilitated that process to some degree.
Something I just learned from this, so it's been very helpful, is, what we're doing with My City Academy. Because I think that with My City Academy, which by the way, since Ann Escobar moved to the state now.
I didn't know she went to step in like that school.
So it'll be driven now by the city, the Department of Neighborhoods and Human Relations. So it'll be very, very interesting. But we have 48 or more, or thereabouts, graduates who, one of the things that we didn't cover is some of them are looking for employment. And these new arrivals from all over the world, all right, could be very, very helpful, and we don't cover that. I think from a city perspective, we should be looking at certain departments for them to be employed in, so that they can communicate better, because we're not doing a very good job at that. And maybe from so we're asking the chamber, by the way, to become the third-legged partner, so that they
Oh,
can,
in My City Academy.
right, so that they can now, we have a public-private partnership where they can now go, hey, this is kind of cool. So maybe then a bank will pick it up and say, hey, maybe we can make that link.
So I will say that this past year, SunTrust because of the small, financial literacy component that is a part of My City Academy, we worked with Anna on the funding for the program
Right.
last year, and so they did support it a small amount specifically because of the financial literacy and sort of fiscal education component, and so I think that that's ripe for growth.
But, you know, I'm also surprised, and I think one of the other surprises for me, having been in the business community and now in government, is the total, the number of businesses who make a lot of money off of new arrivals, both documented, undocumented, refugees, otherwise, that do nothing. And I'm shocked. And I really am, it's shocking to me, and I think there has to be, there will be a wake-up call for those businesses. And that wake-up call is gonna be, what did you do for me lately? And I think that's coming because these new arrivals are coming of age. And they're gonna say, you did what? You didn't do anything for me, you know, so I think there's a big problem there.
And who are those? I mean.
Oh, I can go down that list, from cell phone companies to insurance companies,
Okay.
to banking, to.
I want to get y'all out of here by 5:30, and that way we've kept you for 2 hours, and we appreciate it. So, do we have the financial literacy piece that was in My City Academy as part of your benchmark?
No.
Is there a way to at least capture it in a couple of paragraphs so that you make sure you have it in there, I think?
I think it would probably be going through and ask Lamar to get it. I don't know.
Well, Anna, or right now, it would probably be Aaron, in the city. So yes, there's a way of getting it.
And not for Monday, I mean, but
Yeah.
to add at some point, just to show that there is that. And I guess what I hear you saying is My City Academy might be a place to drive people into additional training, or, let me ask the question, do we think that it's a good idea? I'm gonna load it here, a little bit, but if in fact Danvers and Nice want to continue doing this for other populations, do you think it's worth doing? We have a yes from Turk.
Absolutely.
No, absolutely.
Okay. I know I got a yes
They
from
need to
Yeah.
start Monday.
Yeah, I think it's actually imperative. It's
You know, but-
imperative. I'm not sure that it needs to be done by who's doing it. I think, you know,
You know, the truth and the reality about all these types of projects and endeavors is that the need is humongous, all right? And so you start talking about financial literacy, and very quickly, you can't go 2 minutes without saying, well, but it's financial literacy, but it's also the English component, and it's also the transportation component, you know, it's just all intermingled. And so, you know, you keep saying, this is only a master's project. Well, this could be, you know,
Huge.
this could be whatever. There's just not one project, there's not one endeavor, there's not one agency, there's not one that can address or begin to address all populations in all of the voids and challenges that exist. And so, is there a need for this? Absolutely. And I'd just like to say, you gotta kind of think about where do you want to be a year from now on something like this, and kind of refresh and say, if a year from now NICE has educated, is it put a number, you know, is it 50 people or is it 500? I mean, I don't know the right, you know, is it 5 classes or is it 4 classes? You know.
But it's been replicated, it's a model that's been replicated and served that many people.
Correct. I think that the employer route is an easy way to leverage. Either the employer route or the faith community-based route are good, you know, ways of doing this, train the trainer and leveraging to be able to touch a meaningful number of people. And a meaningful number, it's not thousands of people, it is dozens of people. For something like this, I think that, once again, I don't know if it's 50
Make
or,
sure we get you on.
I don't know if it's 50 or 500, but you just can't think that, you know, especially not knowing, like you said, who does something like that. But, so I think employers, school system, or faith community are your ways of deploying a train-the-trainer program to touch a.
and Jose, you bring up a good point. I think, when you look at employers, they have an answer still making up concepts now, or attempting to, and how they're gonna use it. When you look at the school system, they have all sorts of things on the table, and they're trying to balance that. The faith community, they are always looking for something to aid them in their outreach. This may be that, and I think we so often don't look at the faith community as we perhaps could. One last thought on what you've done a fabulous job.
Yes, we should
So,
do that.
congratulations.
Have a cookie.
Have two cookies, because, you know, I eat them. But the last thought I had here was basing this economic cultural competency, or banking competency, or whatever you want to look at it, on from where they're from. Because I think it differs from, if you're from, I'll use Colombia as an example. Many Colombians of all economic levels use banks because they know it's safe. You can go to another country, even in Latin or Central America, and they're not going to touch the bank because, oh my God, my money will be gone tomorrow. The country's not solvent, so it's history. So I think looking at, it's going to be different from culture to culture or country to country as to even what you're telling them here, because they may not have the faith they need in what our current banking system is.
Right.
You discovered some of that, right?
Yeah, and that was something, that was one of the big things I wanted to include, and I did it the first lesson, although it was a struggle with their language ability, that they were not, it was hard to have a discussion. But part of it, my first lesson was, what does bank mean? What kind of feelings does that?
Sure.
You know, to start there, and not to dismiss any past experience, but to say, yes.
You know, their accounts are insured here, and you can name the countries that they are insured in.
Right.
You know, and, you know, so it's a challenge. And what does that insurance mean?
Market segmentation, I think is your point.
Lindsay, you see all the different groups working in different ways. And what I hear here is that Thrive Nashville, which is a great name, by the way, could go in a lot of different directions in terms of branching out after it is financial literacy. I'm not suggesting you do it, but I'm just saying it's an umbrella maybe for a lot of these. We may have other students who want to put projects under Thrive Nashville. But do you see a way for sustainability here that through some of what you're doing? Not necessarily Housed at Turk, that's not what I mean, but through partners that you have. The faith community's great, employers are great. Is there, and I also think the government needs to in some way make it more attractive for businesses to embrace these communities, but I don't know what that looks like. But I know y'all do advocacy too. Is there anything that just in listening to this and all the great advice you've given Rachel, that you see as suggestions for sustainability moving forward?
I mean, and I will definitely defer to the group. I think you all bring as much to this answer as I will, but I think that and we weighed this question last time, sort of if it's under one organization, does that become divisive or off-putting to anyone else? And so that's obviously a consideration to take into it. But if this project isn't someone's baby, then it's not sustainable. And I think you have a table full of champions here who are willing to, I mean, and these voices are much more powerful than my own, but I think if you, I think the right people are ready to sort of champion and cheer this on, but it's got to have a home and an owner. And so your question may be, where is the home? You
Yes.
know, who's taking this on?
Right now, there's a home at Knox
Mhm.
for the time being.
I
But
think
is
the
that-
Andrews Institute for Civic.
And it was funny is that my boss said to me, he said, haven't people asked you about this kind of stuff in the past? You know, like I had someone come from the school district like years ago when she's moved on from where she was. He was like, we have these people come off the plane and it'd be so good if we get them to come to Edgerton. And I was always like, sure, you know, you work out how it's going to happen because I don't have the resources to kind of do it. And he's going like, you just kind of done what they asked you to do all along. Kind of thing. That there is that the kind of demand there, and it does take the impetus to try and
currently in the process of trying to raise funding for us to be an incubator for 1 year for the projects that, you know, after graduation. We don't have it in place yet, but that's what we're trying to do. And obviously, from an umbrella standpoint, the students, the graduates always have us as, you know,
Sure.
but we're not.
I know, I was just kidding.
I know.
But I like the
No,
thought of
you're-
that, a
Yeah,
civic
you know.
leadership accelerator.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the
Exactly.
buzzword.
That's the current buzzword, yes.
But, you know, it'd be interesting, knowing Jay somewhat, you would think that Thrive could be a new program, that would launch and that somewhere in JA, in some think tank in Denver or wherever they're from, some.
You're right.
You're right.
Colorado, yeah.
Right, they would, you know, they would say, oh my God, the changing demographics here, should own this. You know what I mean? It just seems the right thing to do, because when you look at Nashville Public Schools and you look at 23% of the children coming into those schools as to who they are and what they will be, you know, they'll be 35% in 6 years, you know what I mean? And you would think that from a JA perspective, this would be a full tackle, you know what I mean? That would be my.
I agree with Nancy, that's where your systemicity comes from.
Right.
You know, whether it's Jay or somebody, but it, you know, I just thinking out loud, not that, because I have no idea what your ambitions or goals or whatever are.
We're pushing her to
But if
think
it's,
up, but
but
yeah.
just to, I mean, just as a wrap up, even if like you want to step out of this whole world altogether because you're done with the degree and you want to move on, but kind of the overall pitch, I mean, I think from a, you know, from a professional and from a academic perspective, showing up, I mean, in front of the JA leadership nationwide and saying, as a part of my degree, this is what I focus on, this is what I concluded. What I concluded is, these are because the demographics in Nashville, but these are the demographics nationally.
National,
This is where we're going, this is, and so my pitch to you, organization, is that we need to devote some thinking around how do we serve and engage this population. And so perhaps that the right way to do it is to come up and raise the money to run a pilot program in wherever,
Right.
I mean, in
Exactly.
Nashville, Tennessee, to become that best practice that doesn't exist today.
And your argument for Nashville would be very good.
Sure.
You know,
Right,
because if
and
you look
then
at
become the opportunity from an entrepreneurial, you know, academic, I'm finishing this degree in
Right, right.
civic leadership,
Moving
is that the
forward.
opportunity is, there is not a best practice for da-da-da-da, and JA is well positioned to be that. And so that's kind of how you answer the sustainability, you know, so that, because I know it's one of the requirements, right, for your.
And to at least
for the
have a
project.
plan for it,
Right.
yes.
Well, there's a sugar daddy, you know what I mean, that can actually do it, and I mean that in a serious sense. Or a sugar mommy, whatever it is, you know.
I thought you were gonna say Mars candy or something,
Well,
when you said a
Well,
sugar
that's
daddy.
right, it could be that too. But there's somebody who says, oh my God, what a fabulous idea, all right? And it's in our mission, and you own it, and you own it. So, how cool would that be, you know? I could just see the class name Thrive, you know, it becomes, it really, I think it's.
We were so excited when Rachel came up with Thrive, but we deliberately suggested that she make it Thrive Nashville, so that you could have a Thrive Louisville, or a Thrive Austin, or a Thrive whatever. But I think I don't know what your long-term commitment to JA is, but certainly I think Jose has a pretty good idea that could, you know, when you think about it, it's not just the changing demographics, it's a whole new business opportunity for them, or a whole new market for them.
Right,
Yeah.
Yeah, and don't think, I know that, you know, it's just easy to say things.
She's supposed to walk across the
But it's
station
not,
and say-
don't think of it, I mean, I really have no idea, but it's almost like, yeah, it's a nice wrap up of this project, and here's the bow, and so I want nothing to do with it, but here it is. Here it is, and you ought, I mean, at least if all you do is initiate a conversation at those levels of the organization, you know, I think that's something that you would
Well,
have
it's a
done.
birth model, I mean, it's a fabulous opportunity. And I would think if, and you know, organizations that do the work that JA does, not to the extent they do it, But I would think that JA would jump on this. I would think, you know, if handled in the manner in which.
Yeah, it would need to be focused on school-aged kids, because it's one of those things that I think organizations learn well from, is to do their mission and not to pick up whatever goes along the way, and that's something that. I know
Some
that
learn it better than others.
Yeah.
It's hard.
we try to focus on the JA, and so I know our focus is K through 12.
Right.
And, but there's that need there, because they're in the school district, and our programs are not gonna serve them any better and recognize their background, when it's kind of one size fits all. And I know there's other areas, there's a Hispanic initiative that's happening in New York, and it would be cool if, and I know there's a girl in Pittsburgh who's doing her doctorate. She worked for a resettlement agency, and so she's been doing a lot of stuff in the schools which have high populations of refugees, with some programs there. And we didn't talk too much, just because I was looking at adults, but,
But there's always a way. I hear what you're saying, and I'm always one of those that says, you know, mission focus. But at the same time, there's always a way to, so for example, like, the Parents as Partners program comes to mind that we do at Winning Young. So Parents as Partners is the outcome is benefit for the children. I mean, we wanted to do, but we're not talking to children, we're talking to, it's a program that engages parents so that children thrive. And so, you know,
Well, you could even do parents as partners with the partner, I mean, you could do 11th to 12th graders with their parents. Yeah, you could do, so anyway, thank y'all. I'm so sorry that we went over the 2 hours that we originally asked you for. And I just want to say, this has been.
it's a lot easier to just talk and not have to walk away and you have to do anything. I like this kind of meetings, right?
Anytime you want to get ideas, it's
And that, you know, that is the actual, those are the actual pictures and everything that Rachel used. I don't know if she showed them to you before. But I just want to tell you that this has been the most engaged, one of the most, and one of the top 3 most engaged committees. I probably should not say the most, although the most engaged committee in first giving feedback at the, kind of as the process began, and then reacting to the final. And Rachel, you did a great job. I mean, I love being in this town. I got choked up a couple of times. And as Jose said, and I'm so glad we got it on tape, you know, it's the number, and by the way, we'll edit all this. We won't, you know, do anything that will get us all in trouble.
They got a company name.
Yeah, but as Jose said, it's not hundreds of people right now. It's the dozens that over the next year you might be able to affect through NICE while you figure out what another sustainable market is.
So one last thought on this.
Yes, good time.
Only because,
The turkey's gonna burn.
right.
Yeah.
he said that he's gonna let Saturday.
Monday and Tuesday, I'll be in New York with Bloomberg,
Okay.
talking about this scenario of this immigration again. And I was in Atlanta with the Atlanta mayor 2 weeks ago. I was in Miami last week with some fine people. And what ends up happening is, I think there is a government thing here. I don't think this is a government thing, but I do think it's a government ask. It's a government ask from the mayor of Atlanta, who would be happy to do it, and say, I think, yo, JA, or yo, organization, this is something we need to conquer here. How are you gonna help us? So I think you can do that from a New York perspective, certainly from my Miami perspective, certainly from a national perspective. We can probably go down this list to Minneapolis and quite a few others. So I think there's another way of looking at it.
Yeah, when you start with your boss here at JA, and we figure out the way to, you know, approach him and figure out how to make a broader ask. I think it's a great idea, I really do. Thank you, and Rachel will stay in touch. And you will all get an
When are
invitation.
you marching? December?
Yes,
Yes.
Yeah.
as of right now, she is.
Yeah, I got papers to turn.
That reflect everything y'all said today, which is another, well, not everything, but some of it. Yes, and all of you will receive an invitation to graduation should you like to come and watch. December is the small is the small graduation, so you don't have to sit for, hours. But we also understand that one more graduation is not in your holiday plans. It is 2 weeks from
Saturday.
Saturday,
Who's counting?
so,
Yeah, we better let you go, you have to go write some papers.
thank you so much.
Great for my family.
And Lindsay, I particularly want to thank you for bringing us back to that point that they actually did have bank accounts.
Yeah.
I
Well,
got-
and Rachel and I had discussed it previously, and it had just stuck with me that it was such a shock
Well-
when we did that, and we're like, wait, they all have banks.
Well, they don't. Listen, they did.
No, this group, yeah,
Right,
this
and
group,
I think
that's
that's a
what
really good point for refugees. But if you look at the documented, undocumented, you're talking about a whole, you got 11 million people out there who probably don't. So I think there's another whole group. Again, it gets down to cultures and demographics and who you're speaking to.
Right.
So I just figured, but
What-
you're
what
right,
do you-
they all have bank accounts, and I think someone is doing that job, and that's a good thing.
Find you another victim in the upcoming class to focus on.
Yeah, the other side of that.
I
Is
think
that right?
Thrive Nashville may become the umbrella.
Yeah.
Hey,
We
But I do
know
want to, because I'm skeptical.
anywhere.
Anywhere,
I
I-
want to know what you told her before I told her, because I want.
You don't mind if I get to read my yours?
No,
Yeah,
I'm
let's
welcome for
chat about it.
please.
Was this lady looking for, was it for you? That she was looking for, some lady from First, from?
From
Northern
Liberty,
Liberty,
yeah,
something like that.
yeah, that's who I've been with, you should have come in and dragged me out, I was telling Rachel.
She seemed
Who was
like,
it?
I don't know if you know her, but she
Well,
seemed
I'm
like she
afraid
was.
to give
just
you,
trying to
if
grab
you got it at home, you may only.
Yeah.
do
sales
it.
pitch too.
What do you
I
think?
Sit there or?
was on the
I was
receiving
maybe-
end of a sales
Let
pitch
me
that
ask,
went
what
almost
are
an hour
you
and a half.
shooting?
Here and there.
He was not gonna let
Okay,
me
so
go
I
without-
do-
Actually, my brother would probably be upset, because he,
The kitchen.
I didn't know how much
There's
brother
so much
eats.
to do.
Like, he's like 6'4", and he just
We
eats,
just did it.
and eats,
Wow.
and eats.
Someone new started today,
It's-
and everybody's cooking for Thanksgiving, and there's just all these. All right.
Thank you all, I appreciate it. I know, I appreciate, we had a meeting earlier, and I spoke with a lot of you one-on-one, and, I took a whole bunch of Lindsay's time as we went through my curriculum to try and make it, something that was gonna be a lot more useful.
Can you hear?
For things. So, this is what I kinda came up with. So, as part of what we've been asked to do for our, master's project, we have to do an online case study. I will email you all the link to that, it went live last night. If they want to do that for me.
Could we use the iPads for the, pull it up?
You can, yeah. How'd you get them out? You just slide?
Uh-huh, they just slide up. This way we can all follow along.
I can do mine, or that.
Or yours.
You can squish it and it goes, that's all the fancy stuff.
So tell them how to get onto it.
So, it's thrivenashville.org is the domain that I have, so that's where it's sitting right now.
Thrive?
Thrive. Thrive Nashville. And so a lot of stuff there, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on just because.
I'm not connected to the internet.
Oh,
Well, let's try it.
is yours connected?
Mhm.
You should be going straight to the Lipscomb.
Okay, so, the start of it is really kind of the background of why, in coming into the master's project, I felt like this was something that I wanted to do as I started to kind of look at the need in Nashville and see where some of the skills I had and where I saw the need were. We had the opportunity here as part of our, classes to do an interview downstairs with Lydia Lenker. So I kind of edited that to kind of get my whole, this is why I see the need kind of thing, and I'm not gonna play it for you because I don't like watching myself on TV, and you can look at it if you want to. But I also had the opportunity to talk with Danver Corral. She was the person that I ended up working up pretty closely with at NICE. She's works from their kind of satellite location at the Autobahn Apartments, focusing on kind of post-resettlement needs of refugees there, and she had worked with Mark Efferly, who I know is with you now, Tom. And he was kind of who had kind of connected me with her. So she and I had worked pretty closely together. In the meantime, she had a baby in the middle of that, so that kind of fit
our work on hold for a couple of months. But she recruited the clients and we worked together on kind of developing what it would be, and I got a chance to sit down with her afterwards and kind of get her input. So this is why she said that it was gonna be an important thing for their clients.
When I came to you and talked to you about what I was thinking about, why did you think it was something that would be great for your clients?
Important for the
Their work,
clients. Since refugees, they work so hard here, work is their basic need. Without work, they won't be very effective and they don't get any longer refugee case assistance through the refugee programs. So they work, and since most of them are illiterate in their own language, they do not know how to manage their financial stuff. They work, they do the money in the bank, but they need somebody else to help them to use their own money.
Right.
So when I talk about my own father-in-law, he is 69 now, and he worked until 68. Like a few days ago, it was a year that he started working.
Okay.
So he made about $1,700 to $2,100 a month, but he never used a dollar on his own. So there are several of my father-in-laws in that community that I thought that I could at least, with somebody else's help like you, use the resources and teach them to use their own money.
Right.
So it is used properly. And there are also some other instances or like incidents that happen in the community that when somebody helped them use their money, they've been getting some money for themselves.
Right.
Either by cheating or like they are paying as a tips. So I don't want to lose their money that they have made from their hard work.
Right.
So it was a good idea that Mark made you and we got to meet each other. And
Yes.
this happened.
So it was great to talk with her, and she has a great passion for reaching more of, or having more financially literate refugees. She's a Bhutanese refugee herself, and so it was also interesting talking with her about just even that demographic, because they were kind of rejected by Bhutan, then rejected by Nepal, because the Bhutanese said, you're Nepali, and Nepal said, no, you're Bhutanese. And so they had no citizenship, so they couldn't open bank accounts there, and so they were very limited in what they were able to do, and that's when they come to the United States, and they don't have a framework even to kind of translate it into. So a lot of you are aware just from the areas that you work in of just the number of refugees that we have in this community, and so in looking at, why do we care about that, there's a big push. I know for sure from working with Junior Achievement, the kind of financial literacy that there is for schools, and realizing that we don't have a particularly financially literate society. There's a lot of people who are spending a lot more money than they have. There's people who do not have savings. One of the interesting things I looked at was that there was a report on how well people were able to deal with emergencies and how much liquid assets they had, and Tennessee ranks 42nd out of the states in the United States. So there's that just across the whole, but then there are these refugees who come in and these immigrants who don't necessarily speak the same language, and we don't have a lot of stuff that is tailored towards them. So as there's the focus on having a more financially literate workforce, having more stuff in the schools for high school students, it just seemed like there was this pocket that were a bit more underserved and didn't have the resources. So with the community growing, and all of you know this too, that we're just not going to be the same community that we are right now in the next 20 years. That things are changing. And the neat thing I saw with the Tennessee Office for Refugees website is just like where people are coming from. A lot of them coming from Asia now, and bringing an extra mix into our schools and into our community there. So there's a need, and it's very diverse. And one of the challenges is having a financial literacy curriculum that can be tailored towards where they come from. So not just assuming that one size fits all and that this is going to be enough for everyone. But they do, when you talk with them, they want to make a life here. They want to have a home. They had a home at some point before the refugee camp, where they'd even built their own home kind of thing there. They want to be able to provide for their family. They want to see their kids go to college and things like that. And so there's a lot of passion for doing it. They're all
having to work pretty soon after getting here. It's not an option for them just to live off benefits like people kind of think they do. They don't. They have to pay back their airline ticket to come here and things like that. So they are pretty motivated to kind of be self-sustaining, but without some of those basic financial literacy skills, they can easily kind of fall into a trap of, you know, they don't have their money in a safe place, so it gets stolen. Or they're just not aware of the resources that there can be from having a bank account, having a relationship with a bank that can help things grow and achieve things like homeownership and.
Or they fall into the payday lender.
Well, yes, and a lot of it, you know, even just, you know, to pay bills, actually going, you know, to a bill pay place, and there's always fees associated with that. And they're not necessarily huge amounts like the check cashing places, but they still add up over time. And if you don't have a particularly large budget, those extra $4 here and there can soon start to chip away at stuff. So, you know, knowing that if you did actually have a bank account and you learned about some of the things that a bank will do to kind of waive fees, like if you have direct deposit from your employer and things like that, then, you know, you've got checks that you can kind of write and send to people. So, talking with the group that I worked with, it was really clear that a lot of the stuff the research had done was very applicable, that it related to their stories.
And you're talking about the Bhutanese, but also NICE in general, or?
Right. The class that I worked with right now, or the first pilot class, was with just Bhutanese refugees. What Danber and I talked about, her next kind of target is with some Burmese that she's working with, and then also trying to do something with more of their higher ESL learners who may have a checking account but not really know how to use it or not know the benefits that can come from developing a relationship with a bank. So definitely seen it as expanded. One of the neat things with this community group was that she was my interpreter, and she could talk to them, and they all had a common language. There wasn't different dialects that were spoken within there, and that she was very financially literate. She struggled with some of the stuff that Jeremiah, who came from First Tennessee, presented on, because he started to get into life insurance and probate and stuff like that. So it got a whole lot more confusing.
Went over there,
And she said, explain that to me. But they asked a lot of questions, so actually I thought it was overkill, but the feedback I got from her and from some of the questions that the participants asked was they actually were really interested to know that there was more to a bank than just a checking account and keeping their money there. But she was very, you know, she has a bank account, she owns her own home, that she's got a loan for a business, so she's really familiar with those kind of things. So it was great that I could ask, or I could give some instructions. Speaking through an interpreter was a new thing for me, and took a little while to learn to stop after I had said a sentence and let her kind of catch up. But that she didn't have to just keep interpreting their questions back to me. She was able to respond, and if they were like, this doesn't make sense, she could put it in a different way. And so that was a real benefit. And I think it's something that as I live to try and work with other ethnic groups is important to find. Either if their English is at a level where we can communicate and we can kind of break things down, and that's great. But if there does need to be an interpreter, it's important to have someone who can do more than just interpret the words, but understands enough of what they are that they can actually be a little bit of a teacher as well.
We got you, and we already have you telling us what you want to do next, so please tell us what you did do.
Okay. So my project development tab kind of talks about the research I had done with how I ended up working with NICE and things like that. And then in my curriculum research, after I started working with NICE, I had an opportunity to present to their leadership group. They have a leadership group that they run every 12 months, and they have 12 different topics that they cover with them. One of the things I was really kind of thought was great from that group was that they, each of the leaders has to get 5 people to sign to say that they have then passed on the knowledge to them. So if they've gone to the class that's on suicide prevention, they then have to share that information with 5 other people and have this sheet that they bring back next month to Denver to say, yes, I did pass this on to my community. So it's a neat way of thinking. It's not just knowledge for any one person, but it's trying to make that knowledge more available in that community. So it was great. I met with them and we talked about credit and credit scores and budgeting, and they all had bank accounts and they knew a lot more, but there was still that kind of
lack of understanding about things. I remember one of the participants asked me 3 times how much he should spend on his credit card, and my response was, well, how much can you pay back on your credit card next month? What can you afford to pay back? Because you don't want to borrow more than you have. And so just some of those new things that are there and that can sometimes be a little too easy to get the bad ones that have maybe the higher, credit cards that have the higher interest and have various fees and stuff like that. So it was a really neat experience to meet with them and also be able to talk with them and say, do you think this is the kind of curriculum that would be useful for people who are earlier, earlier in the whole refugee resettlement process? Is it something that would be very valuable? And they did say that. Also, the other neat thing was, just talking to them to say, well, what are your financial goals? A lot of them were, I want to start this kind of business, that kind of business. I want to do this kind of thing. I want my child to be able to go to college and things like that. So it was nice to hear from them as well as to kind of just see from the different research they had. I had all your lovely faces up on my website too, but you're my advisor.
Is it group where you ask questions or?
You
do
can
direct-
ask
Yeah,
questions
no,
to them.
questions all along the way.
Yes.
So before you show the pictures. Well, I'm curious, of course you did a lot of research on this, and so, not only some of the stuff that's going on here, but
Right.
just nationwide.
Mhm.
I'm curious, like, what, if there's 1 or 2 programs, again, here or probably not here, but that you may have found that was like, if I had time and resources, this is what we need to be doing. I mean, is there some of the
I
best
didn't
practice that comes to mind?
I didn't find a lot that seemed to have a lot of information about what they were doing now. There was some curriculum that came out of, let me scroll down because I've got it down here. No, I've got it on my next page. I just don't remember where it was from. There's San Diego. There was a financial literacy lessons for ESL students that was like a written curriculum that was actually really useful for me in thinking about how to have lessons that were kind of interactive and that were a lot more along the lines of, teaching vocabulary as you're doing this kind of thing. Just because my background isn't in teaching and that kind of thing, I learned a lot through this class. So that was probably the best curriculum that I found. Even that, I found it a very kind of, very boxy. It wasn't very hands-on. I ended up using a lot more kind of pictures that weren't like comic book type stuff, that were actually like, this is a picture of a house, or this is a picture of an ATM and stuff like that, to kind of just try and use those kind of things. But it did give a really good starting point. That was probably the best one that I found. There were other things that were online, but they just seemed to be more like resource sheets that the U.S. Commission for Refugees had a couple of different things that were in different languages. And I think there's a lot of standalone stuff, but if it's not incorporated into something, and I think, even looking at the videos that the students with SIFE had done, they're great videos on different parts of banking, how to go into a bank, how to do these kind of things, but there's not a context for it. And so if there isn't a kind of structure around it, and then if you don't then give the opportunity for them to practice it and see how they could use it, it's hard for there to be the next step. And there's even the motivation to kind of watch the videos or read the flyer to start with.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but what y'all did at Conexion is really, in the country, one of the best examples of bringing it all together in one place. But we also learned, was it Jose Renato you talked to, that it was hard to get people to focus on it until they either had a need or they decided, oh, now I will buy a house instead of that before, so.
Yeah, what's the incentive?
Right.
But yeah, no, and I guess I'm asking precisely because even, again, I don't really think that we have it figured out in Nashville.
Right.
And so, but yet, this type of efforts are so numerous out in the country. I mean, that, again, just in Nashville, we have what SIFE has done, we have what NICE has done, and it's like, I just want to know who does it, who has figured it out in the country? That is like, who is the agency that has adopted which is the best practice, because it's just not out there.
Right, and it seems like there's some stuff that's very tailored. There was some stuff with, I can't think of the name of the refugee group. They're Asian refugees, and it was very targeted on them and looking, and I think the places that were successful were looking at a holistic approach. So how do we help you understand our whole community? And so what are the kind of government services that are there, and what are the, and I think
That's the other thing we have here in Nashville,
trying to
the
get
American Council, right?
yeah. So, and I, maybe it's also that people are not reporting on what they're doing, you know, so there's not a lot of like web, you know, or,
Well, one of the
Articles
frustrating
there.
things in your early research was that the National Council of Mayors, is that the name of, yeah, the National Council of Mayors had this whole package that they had done for cities to use, but you had trouble finding any city that used it. I mean, it was a model that was on their website,
right.
but when we started trying to find cities that had used it, it was hard to.
And there were also little things that seemed really interesting, like there was a place up in the New York kind of area where she had developed a Monopoly game that was kind of around banking things and stuff like that. But that just seems to have fizzled out. It was, you know, I found a lot of information about it from like 7 years ago, but there just didn't seem to be anything where I could be like, hey, how much will it cost for me to buy a kit or something like that, so.
But follow up on that, Jose, so what do you think with all these disparate efforts?
Well, I'm just wondering why that's the case. What that's the case, because it is clear, we all know that this is a tremendous need in these communities. And so why has there not been that national best practice model?
Right.
I mean, I don't have the answer. And is this then kind of, you know, moving forward for you, is this part of your, you know, in a research project, is like, okay, so this is what I've done, and this is the opportunity for
Yes.
the one that's coming behind me to focus on
And-
creating that best practice
Yeah.
around financial literacy for this population. It may be out there, I'm just, you know,
I haven't found it, and I think part of it, part of it might go back to the comment that both you and Adam made of, people they're not jumping to get financial literacy education. So people aren't, the clients aren't saying, I want this. If you sit down and talk to them and talk about it, they're like, oh yeah, that would be beneficial for me. Yes, I will give up this time to do it. Because time is limited, and they're trying to learn English, and they're trying to navigate getting their kids in school and stuff like that. And I think maybe part of the fizzling out or not being any kind of good practice that's gone is there's just not, it's hard to sustain the demand for it. And I think that's
Well,
where.
even though there's a need, but there may not be a demand. I mean, we know the need's there, but creating the demand for it.
But it's very interesting to me. It's a fabulous predicament, I would say, because you would think that this would be a business problem. So if I ran a bank, I would think that I have all these new arrivals coming to many cities, particularly here. And so what is the banking industry doing to help solve this problem rather than leaving it up to a social service agency or government? And I would think that, and I know from here of banks that have been totally not wanting to get involved, to others that have sort of dipped their toes. So are you aware of any commercial, I mean, if I were a bank and I knew the demographics of Nashville, and we know that now, by 2040 are going to be what they are going to be, all right? I would like to build that foundation and be the first there. And I think the real trier right now, because it's changed, though, is probably Fifth Third. And what do you,
But you actually have somebody who's supposed to be sitting in this chair from the banking industry.
Yeah, he's not been able to make it today, but I don't know why. I know, especially with the Bank on Music City initiative from United Way, that there's been more of a focus on the unbanked and underbanked across the board. I don't know why they're not tapping into it. When I spoke to Jeremiah Stevenson from First Tennessee, who came and did a presentation, they saw them as being potential clients, and they were like, yes, if they were financially literate and understood, this would be great, because then, you know, they would have a checking account. But I don't know why that doesn't trickle down to a branch level, and whether it is just that language barrier that is, and the cultural barrier where people in the bank don't understand the people that are coming in, and the people that are coming in have that nervousness. And it's what
But I
Lindsay
think
talked about last time a little
yeah.
bit about, you know, what if banks became Thrive certified, and they had that.
Well, it's interesting because,
Understand it.
you know, even with, in my business world, I went to banks and said, fine, I want my team members to go to you, and I'd like them to have checking accounts. And can you issue them a card? And there wasn't a bank in Nashville that would step up to the plate and say, well, I'll do that.
None,
Free of charge,
zero?
Zero. And the particular bank I was doing business with at the time said no. So we switched banks, and they said no. So there was sort of like, it's very frustrating, because you would think they're building the foundation for the future. They may not have what their bank needs now, but 3 years from now they
Because
will.
they would not be big customers? Is it
Well,
that?
you know, and they're also taking away from the, you know,
I mean, we did a lot of work in the early days around this, and so it is, I guess, it's very not, it's true, you can, the song we sang is, there's a business case for you serving these people. There's a business case for you to pay attention, because they, if you grab them now, they're very loyal and through the process of integration. So right now, maybe all you're doing is cashing checks, but you know, 5, 10, 15 years from now, you're going to be doing business loans and mortgages and this and that and the other. But there's a huge, and people say, oh yeah, let's hold hands and listen. But there's a huge disconnect between that and especially in the larger banking industry, where, you know, they want investment today, results 3 months from now, so they can report. And so there are good cases. Today's Fifth Third, but 8, 9 years ago was SunTrust and Bank of America a little bit. And all of those initiatives have fizzled over time. And so.
which is why payday loans go where they go.
Correct. And so.
Because no one's taken the opportunity to develop it.
And I gotta say, I mean, we're kind of digressing. Let's move on, but I do want to make a point about
Right.
payday lenders. We get part of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want to make it now
Or-
and then?
No.
Or you.
I wanna-
No,
This is her
this is kind of, this is helping.
stage.
Okay, so, there's not anyone who's like the star doing it really well.
Right.
And
That's so
And
true.
I don't really know completely why. So let me jump into what we tried to do. So the vision was to not just impart knowledge, but to allow that knowledge to be translated into action. And so we had the first 3 classes in a classroom setting, and then the final session took place at J. Otis Town, where they had an opportunity to actually bank a check and to go shopping in the businesses. And I had a couple of volunteers from a local First Tennessee bank come and be the bankers in the bank. And some of my staff and friends helped be sales managers in various different shops. And it really was a partnership, and I wouldn't be able to do it without NICE and their location being where the refugees were close to. And also, Amber brought some of them in her car. So there was she had a very big SUV that 6 people climbed out that first day as I was waiting for them. So, but it was, that's one of the things though, is that there is the challenge of getting them to a place, and a place where you can do that. So, we structured it around 4 lessons. My class participants, they had tried to select those who didn't have a checking account, or else those who weren't able to use a checking account themselves. So there were a third of the class, 3 out of the 9 who finished it, there were 10 who started, who had a checking account, but they were not confident. Only one of those 3 said in the pre-test, I'm confident, I can do a deposit ticket, I can go into a bank and use your services, I can write a check and things like that. And she was my backup interpreter when Denver wasn't there. So there was a lot of them who just didn't feel confident about things. Up here it shows that, so I asked them 6 questions. Do you currently have a bank account? Do you feel confident going into a bank and using their services? Are you familiar with a deposit ticket? Can you write a check? And have you received a bank statement? And then did you check your bank statement to see if it was correct or not? So generally overall they were
they were very negative towards that, which gives a lot of potential for helping to improve that understanding. So that's kind of where we started, and this is where we ended at Jamestown, where they'll all have certificates and be very proud to have a picture taken with their certificates. So my structure was very much that of using a lot of visuals. There was, they did not speak English. Some of them could understand a little bit of English, but a lot of them couldn't. And one of the things that I talked about with Denver was that was actually a really neat experience. I almost feel like everyone should have to experience that, because I was in a room full of people who were talking to one another that I couldn't communicate with, and I couldn't understand what they were saying. I'm just like, I want to, and I wanted to talk to them. I was like, I'm going to be your teacher for the next 4
Try
weeks.
going to my in-laws.
And so it was not the same experience that they have coming here, but it was just a little snippet of that whole uncomfortableness and then the not knowing. And I've experienced a little bit of it coming from the UK to here, just because the culture is slightly different. So sometimes you're like, what are you doing? What are you doing in American football? You stop every 10 yards? But there's never, I've never been somewhere where there's been, like I was in a room where there was no one, when Dapper went out to make copies and stuff, there was no one else who would step up and talk to me, because none of them felt confident. So even the one who could speak a bit of English, she was just very happy to speak in her own language with the rest of them. So it was that kind of feeling of, oh my goodness, I don't know where to start with you, I don't know how to communicate. And obviously it changed over the 4 weeks, and by the time we were in Jamestown, there was a lot more that I felt I was able to do, even though I knew no more words in Nepali than I did when I started. But it was just, I think it's a neat thing to have, and I'd love to see more of Nashville interacting and understanding that awkwardness that there is with something not being familiar and not being new to you.
Are you going to show some of the photos and cards and different things you used, or is
Yes,
that's in the
so
black notebook?
what I have, I'm not going to go into, so under my class, this mouse was the wrong way, I know it frustrated you in the class too. So I have links to all of my different sessions here that have some pictures, along with links to all the curriculum that I developed to use. So we did a lot of pictures with vocab, and by the end of it, I think Danvers' comment was that she felt that all of them knew at least 75% of the words that we talked about. So what a deposit is, what a check is, what's the difference between a credit card and a debit card, and the different things that a bank has. So we did a lot of visuals. We also tried to tie in what it was that they wanted to do here in the US, and then how a bank could help them achieve that. So they really, I think they really hated me for this one time, but I got them to draw a picture of what they wanted. And some of them got really creative. Someone had like a little, almost like a daycare type thing. Someone else had a house. Someone drew a taxi and things like that. And others were like, what are you trying to make me do? But then thinking about what are these services that we've talked about, so this was in the second lesson, what are the services that we talked about that a bank provides that could help with this? What are the things that you would be having to ask and find out about in order to do those kind of things? So trying to tie it to what are your goals, what are your dreams, what are your visions for here, and then how can this be something that is practical and help you?
And I want to say here, a lot of what you said in your first session with Rachel made it into the actual design. I know Lindsay talked about using pictures and photographs
And be a lot more.
and be more interactive. And we learned from your experience early on at Finexion, and also sight of it, right? So I just want you to know that she listened, and we saw the results reflected in her final curriculum.
So, so I have all the material from my sessions here. So our second one, we started looking at how do I make bank deposits and save. And one of the things that I did learn was that things take a lot longer. Even with padding in time, Lindsay and I sat down and put it, and I thought, 45 minutes for that, okay, whatever. But it took probably an hour. So there was some stuff that we just didn't get onto because their level of language was such that it just would take a lot of time to even kind of go through things. And they wanted to go through and learn the vocabulary, so we spent a lot of time doing that. We didn't get onto some of the role play that I wanted them to do, and actually we didn't get onto an activity that I had for saving because we took the whole 2 hours and just kind of talking about deposit tickets and how you complete them, and getting them to even just be able to write the date was something that was challenging. And that's you know, that's the frustration that they find. One of the gentlemen, and he's in one of my videos later, he's 83. He was in the army for many, many years, and he's been here for 3 years. And Damar was telling me that he was super frustrated that first time because he feels like he's been here for 3 years. He should be able to interact and debate and ask questions. Because, you know, if you spent 3 years at school as a child, you've learned so much. And he feels frustrated that he's just not got there yet. And apparently he thought that he shouldn't come to the class because, well, you know, he struggled for 3 years trying to do ESL and it's not been anything. And yet he has been talking to his son and saying, do you know that there's these things that a bank does? And his son's like, no, but why would you need, it's like, well, did you know that there is more than just a checking account? There's these other services that you can get. And it's talking and sharing things with his community. So even though he might still feel frustrated that he can't apply it himself, he does know. He and I learned to communicate a lot more because he was very engaged. But that he now knows what's happening. Whereas before someone was always doing it for him, now he knows. Oh, you're writing a check. Oh, this is a deposit ticket. I know what should be going on there. I don't feel like I can go to the bank myself and deposit this because I can't talk to the tellers and what are they going to say to me?
Which goes back to the market and whether or not they have tellers that, but keep going,
Right.
please.
So yeah, my second session was looking at deposits. And again, I've got all the links to my lesson plan and also the resources that I use there. My third one focused on, well, now we've got money in our checking account, how do we spend it, how do we use it, how do we track what we're doing there. So looking at recording things in a check register, what a bank statement looks like, and how to kind of match those together. We didn't get to spend as much time as I wanted on that because we just ran out of time with doing that. But
So is one of the things then, based on running out of time, that you would suggest that you do more sessions so that you can do role playing
yeah.
from what they learned before in the next session or something like
Yeah,
that?
one of the recommendations that Denver and I both kind of came up with, and both had slightly different takes on it, but was that there did need to be more time and there did need to possibly be one, you know, a longer amount of classes, so either 4 or 6, and also spread out. Because what ended up happening, because this was a master's project for a master's degree, was that it got condensed into 2.5 weeks of let's get these 4 classes done because these are the times that we can meet and this is, you know, this is where I can get off work and do kind of things. So it didn't have the luxury of being able to plan so enough far in advance because Denver was off on maternity leave, so that kind of into that kind of planning. And so having the lessons over 4 weeks or 6 weeks rather than so condensed would help for those who actually kind of review this stuff. Because I gave homework, and I don't know, I'm not a teacher, so I don't normally experience people not doing homework kind of thing. But there was definitely, you know, a lack of utilizing the resource I gave them. And it was frustrating because it's like, this was for you to practice. I know that you don't have a means of practicing otherwise, so that's what this was for. But Denver did have, before the last session, she had, I think 3 of the participants came to see her at her office and said, can you help us with this? You know, help us, we want to get it finished. So it was kind of good to see them doing that. And I think if the class was
Before the
longer,
last sessions, so before they went to BizTown, they wanted to learn more.
they wanted to help. They wanted help with
Okay.
the homework I've given them.
Well, why don't you click us through till show us the rest of it all the way up to BizTown.
So the last class that happened in JA this time, and was a whole lot more engaging because we were able to take more pictures of them doing stuff. So we kind of kicked off with, again, focus on what their goals are and how the bank can do that. And then they started looking at preparing a deposit ticket, and we did a lot of practice so that they could actually go into the bank and say, I would like to deposit this check into my account. So they did a lot of practice here, and then we actually put into practice. Let me show the video from when they went into
This is
town.
a First Tennessee set up at BizTown.
Yeah, First Tennessee got in early enough to sponsor it, and so they're our bank in this town.
Hi, good morning. I'm good. And you?
I'm Cynthia.
Okay, nice to meet you.
I'm Anna.
Uh,
I I would like
Good morning, how are you? Okay. Good morning.
All right. How are you doing?
Good morning, how are you?
Yes.
How are you? Okay. Thank you. I have arrived.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for your kids now. Get that?
So it was neat, they entered into a whole lot more than I had thought they would, given how kind of reserved they were in so many of the other classes. But it was interesting that, I think there's maybe one who didn't really try and say anything, but all of them did, and some of them had kind of written down the words, because they were literate in their own language, and they written it down.
Should have Joe Carn wrote that day, right?
So, so it was interesting to see them doing that, and talking with the representatives from First Tennessee, I kind of was a little sad that had been their partnership, because they're closing their branch that's in the area where these
First
refugees
Tennessee is
live.
closing their branch.
So it's like, okay, that's really wonderful. But they, I was talking with one of the tellers who came from that branch, the one on Thompson Lane. She's like, yes, these are the kind of people that who do come in, and we don't necessarily serve them very well because there is that language barrier. We can't connect with them, and they don't necessarily have the understanding of what it is.
Did First Tennessee tell you why? I mean, do we know why they're closing?
I didn't. It was one of those kind of.
I know. Because it's not profitable. They're not making money. They're closing, First Tennessee is closing like 6 shuttle branches, and not surprisingly, it's in those areas. And, but so is everybody else, so.
Right.
So it's not, it's,
It's not only that.
Yeah. So.
okay.
So
What
then-
else from, Lindsay and I were both at,
You were both there.
there for the BizTown experience. I'll defer to Lindsay for a minute while I try to find my voice. What was your reaction?
Yeah, I thought it was great. I was really impressed with what they had learned and what they were covering and the way that they were interacting, and also, similar to your observation, how earnest they were and how serious they were taking it. Yes, they felt a little bit silly, but they were trying really hard to say deposit correctly, and they had gotten that one down. In the way that they were willing to help one another, I could absolutely see 2 or 3 of them going into the bank together and figuring out how to make that work between them. And so, yeah, I was impressed with what they had learned, and how I could see their sort of inner turmoil of wanting to do what they usually maybe do, which is not rely on words so much in those situations, or not engage the person at the bank or the cashier, or not write down the information in their check register, and then the way a classmate would be like, no, go ahead and do it, try it, and the way that they would put themselves out there like that and go ahead and try and implement what they had learned. So.
Well, the question for me was, how do you develop a curriculum that then you can carry on in practice in some way? If they get really excited and are earnest in trying to learn, and you do it in 2.5 weeks, and you take them to BizTown. One of Rachel's original ideas was that there'd be one more field trip to an actual bank, a bank that was open to working with them. But that's, and my other frustration, a good frustration, in watching the impact you had on 9 people was, that's 9 people. I mean, how do you duplicate this or do it, as you said, how do you create a model that reaches the people who, all of the people who need it? This was a master's project, and this was a pilot, and I'm not expecting you to have reached, a lot of people, but that's my question. If in fact there is some impact, and if in fact Denver does want to try it with other refugee groups, how do we continue to make it better, but how do we also figure out an ongoing impact? It's great to have the information, but how do you then create a welcoming environment in the banks that you just told them how to use? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, but I also think there has to be a new business model for the banks. And the business model, like Jose just pointed out, is what's my return in 3 months, not what's my return in 3 years, and not what's my return. So it's a very short-sighted. And I think I just wrote it down, I'll take it with me, is discussing it with their board. I know people on the board of directors of First Tennessee. And if one of the board members brings it up, is this, so how are we building this foundation? I gotta tell you, it's a fabulous business model. It really is a great business model.
Don't you think, if you show the numbers in this city, is it just because of the impression of the lack of good customers that might come out of that population?
Well, it is just, it doesn't fit into the box, and so, so for every potential 100 accounts that they might open like this, that they will charge, a minimal $5 a month that will require tremendous amount of staffing, cultural competency and all that, they can turn around and make a loan to, another person, and from a profitability perspective, just be as effective. So that's where their focus is going to be, and with less and less, with more pressure and some regulation and the environment for banking, it's just harder. I'm on the advisory board for First Tennessee, so I've seen First Tennessee has never been a particularly aggressive bank to the refugee immigrant community, as SunTrust was at some point, or Bank of America was at some point, or Fifth Third is now. But even those, they struggle because you have like the community people within the bank, the community people advocating and fighting to upper management and saying, and making those arguments that this is the right thing to do, this is the right place to be, this is the right programs to bring. It's a long-term thing, but it's.
But you understand my concern of giving people this kind of knowledge only to have them frustrated in trying to practice.
Oh, sure. But I think it goes beyond banking, though. I think this is a cultural competency problem, which I discovered today, which I think we were talking about just before, which is a major grocery store chain in a poor neighborhood, whereas they're not doing the right things not because they're not making money there, they are making money there, but there's no one there who could raise a voice as to what they should be doing. So it's a whole different, it's a competency thing that I think that maybe can be addressed even through a chamber. There has to be further conversation on it, but your points are so well done and so well made. And it actually, it hurts me to sit here and say, why not? Because I can see the business model that would work, I think.
But we stopped you. Keep going, and then we'll come back and have a final discussion.
Sure. One of the interesting things that I found, Jose, when you had talked about, trying to motivate people, they have to have an incentive to why they do things. I was like, okay, so when they come to Javis, I'm not just practicing, but they're gonna get like $30, and they will spend that on whatever they buy, they'll get to keep, and we'll try and make it stuff that they might wanna keep. When they all got their bank statements, I think these were the two biggest spenders, so I gave them $30, and they still had almost $15 left in their checking account. And some of them still had like $24 left. And it was weird what they felt that they wouldn't buy. I was trying to give an opportunity for them to practice, and these two bought 4 or 5 different things, so they actually did practice writing checks and using a debit card. But some of them were just, you could kind of see that they were just used to, you know, not just shopping like we shop here, you know, and realizing that
Very
we're a very
frugal.
consumer
Frugal is the right word.
oriented society, and that I had got a donation from Walmart. They gave me a couple of gift cards, and so I had bought some stuff there. I had bought a couple of small rugs and some bed sheets that were on sale, but they were nice new bed sheets. And I had kind of priced them higher because they had $30 to spend, so something at $11, that's not a huge chunk of it. And they would like not touch anything that cost more than like $4 or $5 individually. It was just really strange to kind of see where their price point was, and that it actually, shopping motivated a couple of them, but it wasn't very motivated for a whole lot of them, the whole like I get stuff.
Was it all product? Did you use any food?
We didn't use any food, and NICE had said to me that a lot of them were on SNAP, and so
Right.
that, you know, the ability to buy food would not necessarily be, but in retrospect, maybe having some kind of, you know, like if it was more of a family, one of the things that I see down, that I'd like to see down the line is having a lot more groups doing this together. So like having the first 3 classes, or if there are 5 classes, happen at different locations. And then everyone coming to JVIZ Town one Saturday or Sunday afternoon or something for like 30
With
to 40
their families.
with their families, it being more of a kind of fair type feeling, and having food and face painting and, you know, stuff like that happening that.
I think it has to do with, I think, a lot need versus want. They may want it, they didn't need it.
Well, we need to learn from
And I
that.
think what ends up happening is, you know, food is always a need, and a bed sheet, which they already have, may only be a want because
Right.
they can get a new one. So again, I think there's a.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. And it would have been interesting too, to just to play with price points and to have 2 sets of sheets and write
Yeah,
the $6 one, the
Right.
$11 one, and see
Uh-huh.
what kind of,
whether there was that difference there, but it was
but no, I agree with that.
Yeah.
definitely.
I mean, Dollar General certainly got it, you know what I mean, if you think about that whole business thing, you know, the dollar store thing.
Yes. Yes. I could not get them to donate anything to me though.
Yeah, there you go.
Thankfully, our local Walmart knows who we are, and so they were like, sure, I'll give you a couple of gift cards. So what I wanted to do with them was tie it all together. So they got to bank and they got to shop, and then they got their bank statements, and we spent a little bit of time reconciling our checking account and making sure that things matched and that they were tracking things well. And then Jeremiah spoke from First Tennessee, and he did a really good job of talking from the perspective of a bank and not from First Tennessee Bank. He really did not stress that a lot. But kind of just talking about some of the safety things that can come with having your money somewhere and building that kind of relationship, and that banks were safe places to have things. And then he did go off into life insurance and probate, because one of the, Krishna, who was 83, asked, well, what happens if I die? What happens to my bank account? So Jeremiah did explain what happened to his bank account. And,
That's not necessarily too good unless you.
and Dapper said, can you explain what probate means? Because I don't know how to translate that. So that, they found that very valuable, just in kind of knowing that kind of thing, and that was an interesting thing to think of as I look at trying to structure things of, well, how about having people come in earlier for 30 minutes and different times to kind of talk about those kind of things, as opposed to leaving it all to the end and it being kind of crammed in. But that was what we did at JVIZ Town, and obviously, just like with all the other lessons, I've got all of the materials
There's video
that I
and
used.
things on the case study.
And there's more videos about stuff, but what I would more rather you watch, and I want to be respectful of time, and I'd really like your input too, is when I talked with Denver about the impact of the project and kind of what recommendations are, we talked for 50-something minutes, and I had a hard time getting the video off my phone because it was too large and there wasn't enough space on my computer and all that kind of stuff. But it was just really interesting to candidly speak with her and capture what she felt had gone well and what we could do differently. So
These are the highlights, this is not.
This is not the full
15 minutes.
thing, yes,
Thank
this
you,
is,
okay.
this is 7 minutes there. So she talks a little bit, because one of the things, I did the post test with them, and they did, and I've got that highlighted on the sheet there, there was definitely a knowledge gain. And one of the interesting things was that as they were doing it, there was a couple of them that we felt we actually were able to communicate without really talking. But it was very obvious that they felt like, I do know this stuff, but I don't think I can do it. Like, you know, if you ask me now to do it, I'm fine, but I don't feel like I can go into a bank. So can I put a circle in the middle in between yes and no? So it was kind of interesting to see that, and so it was really cool to kind of have Denver talk about what some of the participants in the class were doing after that, and so how they were actually implementing things.
What do you, I know we had a group of.
Can you turn it up?
Yes.
You know, they were maybe some of the older demographics. What do you feel that they got out of the class?
Definitely, they thought that they would learn if they participate. The classes were obviously too short for them to capture everything, but we can find the difference now and before they had the class. Like, they know a lot of vocabulary, like they know the word deposit, they know the word withdraw. They also know who else to go and talk to in the bank. Also, during the last presentation at Jarvistown, the representative from First Tennessee Bank, when he spoke about we could have so many other benefits from bank, not to keep and take money out, but like insurance, like we didn't know with our money was just for, the bank was just for the money.
Right. But they didn't have other financial services.
Yeah, so they learned a whole lot than what they've learned in the past about the bank. He was excited, and actually Krishna Dahar went home and talked to his son, like, do you know bank does this, bank does that? He's like, why do you need all those? He's like, did you know that in the past, before I just told you? And he was like, no.
Right.
So even his son could speak English, could drive around, he didn't know all the benefits that he gets from the bank. Or he could get from the bank. So I'm pretty much excited that they get to learn those stuff, so they can pass it. The other thing is, he didn't learn everything for himself. He lives in a big refugee community, and he goes around and talks to his neighbors all the time, since he's a child.
Yes.
So I'm glad that I was pretty sure that he will pass this information around the community, spread out the words.
Right.
So they know that the benefits, what benefits they could get from the bank.
Because I know that Krishna had talked about, he has a bank account, but everyone else does it for him. And it did seem that even if they still don't feel confident enough to do it themselves, like go into the bank, that they would actually know what someone else was doing, rather than have to just rely on them. They'd be able to understand, well, this bill is for this amount, so that's the amount that should be written on the check.
Yes, and though a lot of them do not still have a bank account,
Right.
they might not get a chance to practice that a lot, or they still might need somebody else to go with them. But even when they go with somebody else, or whether they do have idea that what they are doing.
Right, that's true.
This is something I have learned since we got the deposit ticket. Okay, so they do have that idea.
That's good.
Maybe 50% of them studied it and the other ones did not. The ones who studied at home had problems like that, and they
Right.
still are keeping up with what they've learned in the
Right.
class. Some are others, since somebody has been doing, maybe a family member has been doing for them since the very beginning, they might not even be doing it anymore.
Right.
But they still will have an experience how actually it goes, it works. Maybe even if they do not learn much from these classes, I would like to continue these classes just to get them involved, engaged in the financial environment. At least they could understand the environment, like, as we said before they didn't know anything what was happening at the bank, but now when somebody is doing that deposit ticket, they actually know, we have learned in that class that she's doing deposit ticket, and she's writing down the stuff that I'm going to deposit here today, or the money that I'm going to withdraw out of the bank.
Right.
So they at least understand the financial environment. So they have something good to talk about. Okay, I know this is what you are doing. The other thing is you could not do that in English.
Right.
And the other thing is Lila, who is next door in this apartment complex, she came to me with her husband's bank statement, and she also had started keeping the record of her expenses at home. So she's like, Madam, did I do it right? She calls me Madam. So did I do it right? So this thing here is not on the same date. What's wrong with it? Because those who wrote the check on a date, the money was withdrawn later, a few days later.
Right.
So when I explained her, like this is the exact money that you paid for that particular purpose. So the money is taken in exact amount. It is not treated or anything. It is just few days late because that is when they cashed your check.
Right.
And then she's like, oh, good. So I did right. She did right. She did the record correct.
That's great, she's.
The run is gonna even float.
Not too much to learn, that kind of thing, but I was thrilled to see, you know, most of them going into the bank and actually talking to the tellers in English.
So they tried, even though it's like some of them were looking at the written words, like they tried because they wanted to learn better.
And it was great to see them, like, doing that and having the confidence. You weren't in the same room as them, they managed to go.
They were in 3 different rooms and I was just like last somewhere.
Right.
And it went better than what I thought at the very beginning because I was that hopeless that we could get that much done in 4 weeks with
Right.
somebody who does not speak English at all. But it went pretty well and they learned.
Right, it did, like, I remember the first class thinking, well, how are we gonna get there? And then to see them on that last class, actually
Doing
doing
it
it
on their own. Okay. The other thing is they have started shopping on their own. Lila Rai again and Indra Shaki, who were both in the English
Yeah,
class. They together walked to the store close by and they shop on their own with the debit card of their husband. So
Okay.
yes, that was their success. They
Yeah,
can shop on their own. They can put in their pin and they kept the record of what they did. That is what they like. There are some refugees actually who get frustrated and depressed just because they do not know how to do their own stuff. Like one of them would be like financial management.
right.
They do not know how to manage it. So each time they have something else to do, they have to go to somebody else. And some of them, even they do not have anybody to help them at home, so they have to go out, find somebody else to do for them. And do you trust them? You may or may not.
So, that's what we did. And,
Yeah,
and it was good to kind of hear the stories about, you know, people actually implementing and doing it. Because that was, the vision wasn't just to kind of get a nice graph and ended it with, yes, people understand more, but they're actually able to apply.
yeah, this is a nice way to wrap it, to bring that tempo away,
Mhm.
take away.
So your recommendations,
Our recommendations,
at least to start the conversation?
yeah, pretty much. So I've got the documentation of the interview with Danbert, but really, the class will have more impact when there's a higher level of English, because that can just be the biggest barrier to them, even then being able to go on and do things. And one of the things I've enjoyed with talking with Danbert is that she's just not satisfied in any one thing. And maybe this is just the whole like piecemeal approach that happens in national organization. But her next thing is she's looking at trying to get them with their permits so that they can drive. Because there's that whole thing of, okay, so it's great that they can speak English, and it's great that maybe they have this financial literacy understanding that, but what if they can't get to the bank themselves and they can't get to these kind of places? So I think there are a lot of barriers, and so to actually have participants who are able to put it into practice more, they either need to be kind of more motivated, so maybe younger. Some of the class demographics were their husbands brought the check in. There really wasn't necessarily a lot that they felt like they needed to do, or that they are at a higher level of English. They may have a bank account in that instance, but they may not really know how to use it and know the extra the things that a bank can kind of bring. And so I think my focus would be to kind of get these refugees to open a bank account. Well, actually, maybe it's not. Maybe that's just too early or too much of a hard nut to crack with all the other challenges that are, English being the big one. And maybe it is a case of a little bit longer in their time here. Maybe they have picked up some of the things that there are, so they have a bank account, but they don't realize how to use it. They don't
understand how they can build things and build that relationship.
The flip side of that is your last recommendation, and that is that you train trainers who are fluent in the language of the groups so that they can speak to them and train them in their own language, right? I mean, you're still going to have to teach them certain English words, but let's come back and discuss that as a group, but there's,
And I do, and that's it, first, for it to be scalable, it has to be more than just me, and I would love to meet lots more different groups, because it's fun. But I have to also work, and I have a family, and, you know, they have families, and they have certain times that they can do these classes, that my boss let me go and do them. So there's that kind of thing, so training the trainer is, I think, a really important thing, and Lindsay, you kind of had brought that up as one of the ways that you and it look at things. But then, given how these communities are and how incomers or, you know, new arrivals, they rely on people within their kind of ethnic groups to point them and give them those kind of things. So even if it is people who have been here longer and may have some kind of understanding, if it is like making sure that their understanding is correct and that they know things, and so the information that they are passing into their communities is right, and so that they're able to tell them those kind of things too, because they're communities that I wish ours was like a little bit more, that, you know, that people are talking to one another,
Right.
you know, that it's, you know your neighbors, not just because you're checking to see who's gonna have your car, or whatever, you know, that there's more interaction and there's more reliance